Welcome to Winnow and how to embellish an image. I suggest you view some of my other videos about embellish before watching this one, including the introduction to embellish, the embellish coordinate system, embellish tiles, the metadata token editor, and the embellish emboss effect. In this video, what we're going to do is reproduce the embellish that we're looking at here that is called fall tile. Now the shortcut to do that would be to right click on fall tile and copy. What that does is that makes a copy of that template, and then you can take that template and modify it further to create new templates. But we'll stick with fall tile and we will create a new template, and let's just call this template fall. So now we're back to scratch on here, and we're going to reproduce what was in the fall tile. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go to the export section, and we'll leave all that as defaults. We'll just call the subfolder fall. Well, let's call it fall tile. I got a reason for that. And that's good for there. Now we're going to need some styles for this, so if we nip back to fall tile for a second, we're going to need to have an emboss effect on this border here. We're going to need to have a stroke effect and a shadow effect for the image. We're going to need a shadow for the text, and we're going to add a graphic over here, and we're going to need a shadow for that graphic. So let's start building some styles. So we'll go back to our fall template, and let's start building some styles. So we need to add a style, and we'll call the first style the border. And to the border we need to add an emboss effect. So emboss effect. And we'll tweak this when we come back to looking at the effect on the border. We'll add another style, and let's call this style frog. And the frog style will need a shadow. And we'll add another style, and we'll call this one the image. And the image will need a stroke style and a shadow style. So, or I should say effect. So we're down an image here, so we'll add a stroke and we'll add a shadow. Let's just collapse a couple of these here so we can see a little better. And we need one more style, and that's for the text. And to the text, we will add a shadow. Okay, so that's our styles created. There's no reason we have to do this first. We could do this later. Now let's take a look at general. In general, we will want to come back to this because we'll want to, well, we can do it right now. For image, we will give it the style that we've attached to it. So we've got a stroke and we've got a shadow here. We'll get back to that. So we need a border. So let's add a border. Now borders, when they get created, they default to 5% of the long side of the image. And if you create another border, they just get created border 1, border 2, and they get created with random colors. And you can actually swap the borders around if you've made some changes to a border and then you've decided you really wanted it the other way around. Now for this one here, we only need one border, so let's get rid of that border there. And now for this border, we want to tile it. So let's take a look-see at our tiling options. And you can see I've got a bunch of tiles here, and there is a video on creating tiles. So we'll select a tile that I already picked, and bingo, we've already got that kind of funky fall look from before. Now, it's a little bit overpowering, so let's pump the opacity down a little ways to say around 50-ish or so. And let's go with that emboss effect that we created for the border. So now we got an emboss, but that's not what we want. We want it to kind of just slope off on the end. So let's nip up to the border style here and take a look-see at how we want to change that. So let's make this margin more like 2 instead of 3. And now let's take a look at the start EV, because we want the start EV to be a little bit darker. So let's move it down to something like that. And then the mid EV and the end EV, we just want them to be at 0. But there's a little trick here that you want to have the mid EV fractionally larger than the end EV so that the program knows that the mid EV is higher than the end EV because it's brighter. So we'll make this one 0.02 and 0. Now what we've got is we've just got this little subtle bevel coming around the edges. And we're done. So let's close this up. Won't need that anymore. Now let's add some text. So we've got a text. Let's say that for this text get by default put in the top left corner. If you add a second one, it just stacks them up along here until you decide what you want to do with them. We'll just get rid of that second text that I created. And for the first text, instead of putting it in the image, let's put it down the bottom here. So we want to select the border 1, and it starts out automatically assuming you want to put text in the bottom of the border, but you could put them in the top, left, right, or the bottom. Now we want we want this text to be midway between the image and the bottom of the border. So let's justify it so that it's at the middle left and at the y coordinate of around 50. Oh, look at that, nailed it. Now we could fiddle around with the x coordinate to get it lined up with this border here. But one problem with doing that is that as the aspect ratio of your images changes, they won't all be square like this one, the relative percentages between the edge of the image and the image will change. So your text, if you've put a percentage in to move it into the lower or bottom of the border container, it'll move around a little bit as your aspect ratio changes. So there's another option here, align, and what it does is it looks for the nearest edge of the image and aligns to that. And bingo. So we've got that text nicely done. However, we don't really want it to say text number 1. So when you get down to the source for the text, currently it's on the text box, which is whatever you type in here, but we'll change that to the metadata template. And the default template is what we have right now, and that looks pretty good. However, this border is perhaps looking at a tad small on the bottom here. And so let's move that border, make it just a little bit bigger. The bottom border aesthetically usually looks better if it's a little bigger. Okay, so now we got our text. So finally, we're going to add that frog to the graphic. So we'll add a graphic. Now we need to find the frog, and that would be this little ellipsis symbol here. We'll open a dialog, and we'll go and find my frog here. And it's this one here. Okay, so now we got a frog, but we want it down here, climbing into the image in the bottom. So let's try to do that. So the x-coordinate needs to be over quite a ways, maybe not quite that far, and the y-coordinate needs to be down quite a ways. And we're currently justifying to the top left corner of the bounding rectangle of the frog. So we can probably move it down to around 95 or something like that. There we go. Maybe just a little bit more. Another little trick is once you have the slider selected like this, you can use the arrow keys to nudge it. So you can give you very fine control over the arrow key. So I'm pushing the right arrow key right now just to nudge it down. And I could then pick the X coordinate and nudge it over to the right a bit. I'm also using the key. So there we go. We've now got our template built for fall. And finally, let's take a look at back to the export module. And we've got it so that when we export, the images are going to be getting sent to a subfolder called the fall tile. So let's now go down to our images at the bottom, and I'm just going to press Control A to select all those images, and I'm going to press the lightning bolt to do an export, and it's exporting all 40 of these images. And now let's see if we can find these. So I'm going to hit N, which goes to do not embellish. And now let's see if we can find where we sent these. And here they are. Now, I forgot in this to change the stroke on the image to white, which I think is what we had originally. So what we can do here is we can go back to where we were, which was in the coaster series here. It doesn't really matter which one we pick. We can go to embellish. We can pick fall. We can pick the styles, and I believe it was the image style and stroke, and we can change the color here. Now the other thing about the selecting the color is you could simply just pick white and we're done. Or what you can do is you can also pick a screen color, and then you can pick any color you want here, and as you pick the colors it'll show you what the result is going to be, and that can be kind of neat sometimes in order to find stuff, kind of thing. But in this particular case, let's go to white. So, and I think that's a little thick. I think it might have been 2. There. So now we're really done. So that's how you embellish in Winnow. I hope you're enjoying Winnow, and thanks very much for watching.